So I chose to address the hip extension strength and hip extension decreased range of motion. So the patient exhibited a 3 out of 5 hip extension MMT and also exhibited 0 degrees of hip extension range of motion. I chose these because they're both predictors of falls. Weak glute max is going to be a predictor of falls. Decreased range of motion in the hip, especially with hip extension, is going to be a predictor of falls. With the interventions, I chose, first of all, I chose to do a sit to stand with this patient because it was more of a compound motion. You're addressing more areas at the same time. I realized that I was only supposed to pick 2 interventions. However, this patient also demonstrated 5 degrees of dorsiflexion, which would be a deficit. Also presented with 7 sit to stands in 30 seconds, which the norm for this patient would be 15 reps in 30 seconds for someone that's 70 years old and a male. So with that being said, I chose to address that because it also addresses glute max strength. So we're hitting different areas at the same time. For this patient, I'd probably start somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 sets of 10. He only demonstrated 7 sit stands in 30 seconds, so he probably doesn't have that motion down pat yet. Probably doesn't have the muscular strength and endurance to do too much with that. I'd want him in a board range of 12, 14 maybe. I'd want to challenge him, but not to the point where he'd be too exhausted. With that being said, the intervention for the hip range of motion is going to be a little bit more intricate. I'd need to find out why his hip range of motion is the way it is. Is it a joint articulation issue? Is it a capsular issue? Is it a muscle tightness issue? Is it a neuromuscular control issue? So that's a little bit more involved, and I would need to test that. Depending on what I found, if it was articulation, that would probably be some joint mobs, grade 2 or grade 3 and 4 joint mobs with the patient to start out. If it was capsular tightness, that's something we could stretch. If it's muscular tightness, stretch the hip flexors. So that really is more involved in trying to figure out what that is, and depending on the reasoning for that, then that would dictate my intervention there. To regress or progress the sit to stand, to regress it, we could do things like elevate the starting height of the chair to make it a little bit easier. We could do less reps. I'd rather keep the range of motion and work on that than to elevate the height so that he can go through the full range of motion. Just decrease the reps, increase his rest time if we need to. To make it more difficult, we can have him do more reps. We can have him do less rest time, or more frequently I could prescribe him an HEP with that if I felt like he demonstrated enough safety to do it on his own at home, depending on what his home environment looked like. So that is how I would address this patient.